Do you have the sort of cross-wiring associative type situation where if you're playing Doom as an example, and if like I call you and you keep playing and I say, I have the craziest story to tell you, and then a year later, if you replay that level, will that conversation, the moment you hit that part of the level, will it trigger for you? Because that has happened to me my whole life. I'll go back and replay a game I haven't played in 10 years, and I'll like enter a room and I'll suddenly be like, this was the moment that my friend who I haven't spoken to in 7 years called me to say he got engaged or something. Because it just attaches to the visuals and the geography of that room permanently for me. It's a bizarre
with and I've tweeted about this before and didn't see as many people share the sentiment as I did. I have it with music. So when I play a game and I'm listening to a certain album at the same time, they are just forever
That
paired.
is an offensive premise to a story.
I don't mean at the same time though. Like
you mean the music that was composed for the game?
Yeah,
No,
exactly. You mean
no.
the brilliant score.
I also don't mean I'm literally not
She
meaning
would
the game.
dismiss an art form like that. That's
Never.
ridiculous.
No, what I'm saying is, so like if I'm playing through Resident Evil 3 right now, and when I'm not playing the game, I'm also listening to Childish Gambino's latest album, which I am. Now, for the rest of my life, I will remember this week as Resident Evil 3 and Childish Gambino, and they are paired together, rather than like I'm not actually listening to that music at the same time as playing the game.
What
I have
if
all these
you were
albums that I associate
also-
with games?
What if you were also eating like pizza rolls at the same time? Would you then associate?
Well, because I just do that every day, there's
I
less of an
understand.
association where pizza rolls are concerned.
But there isn't the sense of smell is the smart or is the most indelible memory.
It's the
sense
most
that we
attached
have.
memory.
Most
Yeah.
attached memory because it's the
Do you know
closest to the
why?
olfactory.
I found that out, and
Is the
it's bit
proximity
rate.
to that part of the brain, right? Is that what it is?
I thought it was bit rate, so it's the lowest frequency, it's the lowest complexity of data.
Smell.
Smell?
That's what I don't know.
Alana,
if that's
you
true.
wanna
That
join
sounds
in on
like one
that?
of those things that might be bollocks.
No, I would believe
but-
that because I think humans have a very bad sense of smell, so things are
Yeah.
blanketed. Like, humans can say,
That's what I've heard,
I
is
walk
it's
past
just-
Subway,
yeah.
Subway smells like Subway, but a dog would smell 100 different ingredients, whereas I just smell whatever
Interesting.
that bread is.
To be very clear, I don't know if this is bollocks.
No.
Could be a lie.
I'm
I thought-
happy
I don't
to
know.
believe
You
that it's
made
truth.
subsurface circular, so I'm sure this was part of the research in there, like with all the quarantine
smells.
business.
Here's an interesting
Exactly.
fact. Someone, I can't remember the source of this, but they said that if you could represent the entire spectrum of light, it would on 35 millimeter film, it would stretch from LA to San Francisco. I think they said. What we can see as humans would fit on a single frame. So it's
Yeah.
like the audacity for us to say that whatever we just see is obviously the be all end all of reality. Clearly, that's so not true.
Neil deGrasse Tyson harps on about that, and especially if you watch, like from 10, 15 years ago, I had this kick where, maybe not quite that long ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I had a kick where it's just every time I could find a new sort of lecture or Q&A of his on YouTube, I was just ravenously consuming. And he had a whole shtick about how, by measure of the full spectrum of light, we're effectively blind. There are creatures just on Earth, never mind what's theoretically possible elsewhere, of seeing, like we basically see 3 colors, and that's it. There's things that can see way more than that and can see into the ultraviolet or can see down into infrared.
Well, it's all about survival, right? I think that the colors we can see are generally indicative of, if I eat this thing, it might make me sick.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be the point. If it's this color, I shouldn't eat it.
course,
Whereas I would imagine animals that are prey, I think it's a big thing with fish. If you're prey, you need to, prey is the right word. If you need to be aware of anything that looks like a
Could eat
predator
you.
and the shade of a predator. And anything that looks like it should be a threat to you, which is probably a much larger spectrum, whereas we just need to be, that's a gun. Yep.
So because we're an apex predator, we don't really.
We don't
Well,
need
no,
color.
actually, so perfect. An
Mike's
example-
mind is
climb up
spinning
trees
right
to
now
get
like
away. We're not the apex predator.
the I don't know if you would count like a bird of prey as necessarily an apex predator, but probably within their ecosystem. But
effective
like
predator.
hawks,
A hawk, yeah.
yeah, like
nothing eats
a
hawk.
For real.
hawk or an eagle, I read that they, again, this might be wrong. I don't want to validate it as a scientist or
So it's
anything.
like, I just heard this could be bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just like four old people in a bar.
Well, I heard.
Well, one time I heard
on the
my
Facebook-
aunt had a thing once.
Oh, this is a
that she
Facebook
said-
meme. Yeah, we're all going to be using Minion memes any moment now. This is.
I'm reasonably
Has the
confident.
podcast started? Is that what this
Yeah,
podcast
this is going to be our cold open. Yeah.
I think it was hawks or eagles or a similar, like an osprey. One within that realm. They
had wings.
They had wings. They had a beak. They viciously destroy their prey. One
Very
of them.
reductive of you.
They could see into the ultraviolet spectrum because apparently, like the little voles and shit on the ground, when they urinate, it pops in ultraviolet, and it's partly how they see from far away, like a spotlight of like, there's a rat. Because it's almost like a neon sign relative to everything else on. And I thought that's fucking interesting, like that, and it totally explains why it's not that they have our vision, but just to this outrageous degree of fidelity, it's that they actually see things we fundamentally can't.
We were at that place in Ireland that we go to, and they have a hawk walk that you can do, and they'll bring the falcons out, and you can actually
They paint you in ultraviolet sensitive.
It's funny because they said, do not raise your arm, because if you raise your arm, even just to point at something, if you go like, well, over there, is like that hawk will come to you and it'll sit on your arm, and it's very jarring when it does that. So they said,
well, that's
and
training, though, right?
without the like armored gauntlets, it'll just rip your arm off.
Yeah. And so the main thing that they do is they weigh them by grams before you actually go out on the walk, because they know if they're 2 or 3 grams over, they're going to be fat and they're not going to be motivated to go do anything. So they weigh. It's like, this guy hasn't had breakfast yet.
Same thing. Yeah, I'm the same.
I'm the same exact. Just a few
meal.
grams.
Just need a nap.
I step on a scale even before doing this podcast.
Yeah,
was
no,
like,
you want to be at your top of your game.
But he said, watch this. And we had no idea where the hawk was. And he just took like it was a frozen mouse or whatever, and he threw it up in the air. And that thing, I have it in slow motion video. It goes and just swooped in out of nowhere and grabbed that thing. But it's the exact same thing. It's like they see, like, they're like Predator. They can see everything. They see blood, urine, anything in like super high, like
1080p.
Like beyond. No, that's like 5K.
Super high 1080p. But I mean, one thing I've always found very cool is that humans can only create things that they have, for the most part, seen before. So, every dream that you have, every face that you see is a person that you don't recognize, but your brain is not capable of inventing a face. It has to take features from other things you've already seen. We're not very good at just imagining appearances of things. So every time anyone's ever tried to create an alien, it's not going to be anything like what an alien looks like, because we can't even comprehend something being visually different to other shapes or objects we've already seen on Earth.
Yeah, but how do you account like H.R. Geiger or Giger, however you say his name? Like, that guy was clearly seeing that's some Lovecraft.
I think he might have had some inspiration from the real world for those designs.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of
There
penises.
was
There's a
something
lot
about
of
them,
penises.
something familiar. I couldn't figure it out. There was some.
Yeah, titties and dicks everywhere with
That's
that guy,
right.
and it was always anal. It was always anal with that. There's if in Gruyere, France is it Giger or Geiger? I've always heard.
I see
that is-
Geiger.
I will actively work out what the other person is using and intentionally use the other thing just to mess with them every single
Very
time
nice.
it comes up in conversation.
Very nice.
That's a thing I've had.
All right. Well, in that case, let's see if we can break Mike then. So Troy, you double down on Giger. I'm gonna
Okay.
say Geiger. And
I
let's
would
just
also
Oh, you mean
say-
Googa? Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, Googa.
Well, there's a museum in this like beautiful little medieval hamlet that is where the cheese is from, and the entire town smells like Gruyere cheese. If you don't like stinky cheese, it's a quick stop for you.
Gruyere is great.
But there's this great little museum all about him, and features a lot of the conceptual art for Alien, and
They're like trying desperately to get all the non-Gruyere fans to stay for something.
I guess. But the coolest
Or
part
they're
is
like,
that
we need to put all the messed up stuff in one place. Just get it out of the way.
it
The
gets
people who want to suffer can go there.
it gets super fucked up real fast. Like, I had to go outside. I was like, man, because it's all just like satanic and
Oh, yeah.
and anal and everything. But then across from that, instead of a gift shop, there is a gift shop, of course, but outside of of the museum is an alien inspired theme bar
You mean
that
like,
has like you can sit there
Alien
and,
is in the franchise Alien?
yeah.
Okay.
So like you can sit in like these big chairs and it looks like you're basically on the ship. It's so
I love
so
my
great.
shelf of props.
Oh,
How are you
Cougar.
doing
Yeah.
this?
Ah, the Googer book.
How
does he
useful
know
a
it?
shelf do I have?
It
Say
doesn't
again?
make sense. How do you keep doing this?
I don't know how you
So,
do that.
What have I
Five
done?
I would
years
see
ago,
what
I can
random
pull this out.
things we could come up with just so that.
Did we talk about Dune
I
at some
found-
point?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, he's in The Witness. It's great.
Look, I went to a
good
shop. I was in a
crossover.
market, and the guy there said, "I've got a magic bookshelf," and I said, what's the curse?" He said, "It's a great bookshelf. It's got any book you want, but you will annoyingly bring them out as props on podcasts." That was the trade. That was the deal.
That's how
what
they
he
get you.
said.
Yeah.
And then
How
he
we get you.
disappeared.
And here we are.
All right.
I should intro
Alanah?
the show.
Really worth
Hello,
it.
everyone. Welcome to another episode of Play, Watch, Listen. Are we 15 minutes in? We are. Excellent.
It's a new record.
It still counts as an intro. It's fine. I'm Alanah Pearce. I am joined by video game composer Austin Wintory, video game actor Troy Baker, and video game director Mike Bithell. How's everyone doing?
/ librarian.
/ like
Apparently.
magical
Yes.
librarian.
Magic librarian too.
Prop director Mike Bithell.
My goodness.
I have some cool books.
You
If
run
anyone
your
wants to see them.
bookstore like a Harry Potter wand shop. It's
I
just
just
when the
have a
book
problem.
needs us.
I-
Yeah.
I like my reference.
Not
What can I say?
John Hurt.
Very good. You should consider voice acting.
Dabbling.
I keep
Maybe as a hobby.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't quit your day
Yeah.
job. So I keep wanting to talk about this one topic that today I'm just going to brute force my way into it and make us actually talk about it.
Before you get into
For
that,
fuck
Yeah,
sake,
Austin, what's going on with Austin?
Star
What happened
Wars.
to your beard?
Yeah, what happened to your face? What'd you do to your face?
she hasn't figured out I did anything yet. So shut up.
I don't. Something. Are you sick? What's wrong with you? I
Yes,
was going to say
exactly. Happily not.
made a Star Wars joke.
Uh,
I have been watching season 2 of Clone Wars.
How is
Okay.
it treating you?
I really
have yet
like
to
it.
deep. Yeah, it's on the list. Especially knowing that they've just wrapped it up, right? They've just they're in the midst of bringing it to a
I think
thundering
they're making the
conclusion.
final season now. I'm not like super up to date on this various Star Wars TV shows, but I've secondhand watched a bunch of Rebels and yeah, second season of Clone Wars and it's actually really good. No, I'm not. No, tangent stopped. I'm not doing it. I just mentioned Star Wars and I did it to
But that
myself.
is the
No.
podcast.
I was gonna say, I actually had no hand in that.
So I've been meaning to ask you guys a question that I feel like is relevant to what maybe some listeners are going through right now, which is any video games that have maybe comforted you or gotten you through difficult periods of time. Because I feel like, full disclosure, I'm on the board of a charity called Checkpoint, which is entirely about mental health and its relationship to video games, and I highly recommend you check it out as a resource. But I feel
What is it? Can you unpack? Actually, well, finish. But then will you circle back to that? Because I want to know how that operates. Like, I'm very curious what the actual.
That would be a
If I give
tangent, Austin. No,
I know.
we
I
can
get it.
get into it.
It's
But-
the one. They're the guys who organise the quiet rooms at big events, right?
Correct. Yeah.
They've been amazing. Now,
yes.
those are so useful for people like me who get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's
We
so
also
cool to have
basically just
those.
like create resources for exactly things like this, like exactly what's happening right now, which is basically things people can do to maintain their mental health through video games as an avenue, and also like have a lot of discussions on some stuff that I found really interesting, which is just like how certain depictions of things can have an effect on what you see in the real world, how playing a game that gives you positive reinforcement can make you feel accomplished if you're a person with a disability who can't go outside, like things like that. Because, you know, so much of modern media still rejects the idea that video games have those benefits when I think they enormously do. So I was going to jump straight into my story, which I have shared on my channel before, but basically, and this is why I chose The Witness as a background, anyone who's watching the video version, when I first moved...
That's not Firewatch.
No.
Wow.
Sorry, go ahead.
Similar colors,
Wow.
I'm
I
kidding.
love
I'm kidding.
Firewatch. What were your?
though. When I first moved to the US, I didn't have insurance for the first like 3 months or so, and I got sick and I got pneumonia. So that was in a January. I actually got pneumonia. I kind of blame CES. I was already sick, but then I went to CES in Vegas, which is the bane of my existence as media.
Just being in Vegas, generally. I mean, Dice
That was a nice
wiped
one. Good
me
for your
out
health.
this year.
Yeah, you
I
get
thi-
sick
yeah,
every time
it's-
because the air's so bad. But basically that meant I was still in the throes of major culture shock, which I think people don't quite acknowledge when you move from a country that has similar cultural values. Frankly, I'm still learning they're not that similar, but the same language. Culture shock is still a massive thing when you move countries, no matter where you're moving to or from. Australia to New Zealand, you'd still have culture shock. But it's also, being really far away from everyone I know. I always say that is a really big thing about me moving countries when I was 21, was that I left behind every human I had ever met. And that's such a weird thing to do in a permanent sense. So there's just a lot of, generally the first month of moving somewhere new, you're really excited. The second month, you're still trying to adjust. And then the third month is when most people do get really miserable. And that's exactly when this happened to me, was that I just fucking missed home. And the thing that was keeping me sane was that I was going to work every day at IGN. I was making new friends. They were all really friendly and would invite me out all the time. And then boom, I get pneumonia and I'm told that I can't leave the house. I had the option to go to hospital and stay in there for a period of time, but it was prohibitively expensive. So yeah, I had this really bad cough. I can't sleep because the cough's so bad, which I imagine is probably pretty similar to what anyone who has coronavirus is experiencing, and it is absolutely miserable. You can't speak very well, you have no energy, it's just everything's in pain and you're just coughing all the time. So in this period where I was already pretty miserable due to that culture shock and just missing my family and goddamn San Francisco January rainy winter bullshit, but I also was then mandated that I had to stay home for a full 2 weeks where I'm just on drugs the whole time. And I think that I probably would have fallen into depression and just hated everything and had a really difficult time recovering if it weren't for the fact that I was playing The Witness during that period of time. And it did take me that 2 full weeks to finish because I was on so many drugs that I was just sleeping most of the time. So basically what I was doing was sleeping and then in my waking hours playing this game with one of my roommates that is very difficult in terms of puzzle solving, and paired with that gives you an incredible sense of accomplishment, especially because there are no tutorials in The Witness. I don't know if you guys have played it, but basically the tutorial is all entirely a visual puzzle that you're watching. So you figure things out by solving the simplest version of that thing without it even telling you how that functions. And I love the language in The Witness is just fantastic. But then it evolves really rapidly, and there's a point where I have a piece of paper and a protractor and a mirror and I'm solving puzzles, or my roommate is, and we're just pulling out these drawings and then pulling mirrors up because that one's mirrored on screen. So we're like, how would this look if it were backwards? And like figuring all this shit out that just gave me this incredible sense of accomplishment, something to look forward to every day. And, some of them are auditory puzzles, some of them are visual puzzles, some of them are timing puzzles. And they're all segmented on different parts of this island. So I felt like I was both progressing, having a sense of accomplishment, and walking in something that is just incredibly beautiful. And it was just the most uplifting escape that I just can't imagine what I would have done if I didn't have The Witness to play in that period of time and constantly feel that sense of reward and that thing to look forward to, where, your brain can't really even comprehend anything else because I was just on codeine the whole time. And I'm forever thankful for The Witness for that period of time because I feel like I just would have been in a rut.
Have you ever told this story to John Blow?
No, I've never met John Blow. My experience with John Blow is largely being like, damn you, John Blow, because The Witness is so fucking hard. Be like, this fucking guy.
I feel like I feel like it would be any developer's dream to basically hear how helpful they're, especially a game like this that's so kind of unconventionally therapeutic. Like, no, I don't think people would typically pinpoint this as a game that helped them through a hard time precisely because of how hard it is.
It's very specific to what I was going through, but I do recommend it to people who are sick. If you're bedridden, and that is such a very, very common thing with anyone who's had a chronic illness or any kind of disability that prevents you from leaving the house, is you think about being physically ill, but you don't think about what that does to you mentally. Because when the periods of time when my chronic fatigue has been worst, it eats at you mentally because you feel like you're wasting your life and you get very frustrated at your own body because you can't just get better. And you'll wake up every day and be like, I fucking hate myself. Why don't I just get better? This is so frustrating for me. So I think games like The Witness for people who are mentally okay but physically not okay are so helpful, again, for that sense of accomplishment. And also the community of The Witness was really fantastic. I did play it significantly later than when it came out, but just talking to other people about playing The Witness and their experiences with that game was incredible, especially because there are so many hidden puzzles And then there's this final challenge that I've still never done. It's a timed, randomized area you have to get through by the time that the Hall of the Mountain King plays in full, which, you know, is a song that dramatically escalates in like intensity. It's very cool, but no, I've never spoken to John Blow about it, but generally, like, I do recommend The Witness to anyone who is physically debilitated all the time. And I feel like,
did you get sick and then start it, or had you started it and just kept rolling now that you were bedridden?
I got sick, and my roommate started playing it while I was home. So she's a dentist and was working, I think, 3 days a week maybe. So she started it and I happened to be there. I don't know that I would have had the motivation to do it myself, because like an illness like pneumonia, you really just want to sit in bed. But like, I'm sure I still kind of was. I was just sitting on the couch next to her, but you know, having an incredible time. But no, I had not started it myself. I don't know that I would have had the motivation to in that period of time. I think I would have just sat in bed, watched TV, and been miserable. But instead, I look back at what could have been a really dark period of time, and something that I think probably would have had long-term effects on me mentally if I had not recovered from that. I think I probably would have just stayed miserable and associated that with having left home, and maybe I feel like it would have been a lot harder. But instead, I actually think about that period of time of when I had pneumonia as being like, wow, that cough sucked, but also I loved that game and I loved that experience. And I'm very, very glad that I had that in my life at that period of time. So basically, yeah, I wanted to use an episode of this podcast to talk about, A, if you guys have had any experiences like that, or B, if you've had anyone who has played something that you've made tell you a similar story.
Mm-hmm. I have one other question, if you guys don't mind. I'm sorry, this is becoming me interviewing Alanah, but I
that was me last week.
It's just it's so evocative, but another question that I thought was, especially given what we were just talking about a minute ago with the hard wiring of smells and tastes and all that kind of stuff.
Was it?
Oh, was that before we were? I don't remember if we were in it or not.
I think that might be in the show. I'm not sure.
Now's a good time to remind people that there's an hour before. I like to think
my entire life exists in the show now.
It might be. I genuinely don't know.
We need to just wear lav mics and just tune in and out periodically, Truman Show style. But I was curious if you've gone back to The Witness, if it's like, the memory of it is positive, but if you were to play it today, does it reconjure all the like smells and horrible associations of how you physically felt to where you can't enjoy it? Or because that happens to me. I'll have a positive experience of something helping me in a given window of time, but the memory of everything about that experience comes with it now today. Like certain movies, you know, they'll take me back where all the good and the bad resurface, so I just kind of leave them be as a result, even though it's a positive memory.
I have played The Witness with other people because it's a game that I champion now. Like, I love The Witness a whole lot. And no, I think that basically what it did for me was erase the negative memory. So, like, what I picture when I picture myself playing The Witness is me sitting on a couch bundled up. That aforementioned roommate was Vietnamese, and she kept making me this like very specific tea that her mom always used to make her when she was sick. It's like full of all of these herbs that I felt tasted absolutely terrible, but she was like, it'll work, I swear. And I feel like it may have, it was like garlic in it. It was like, so I remember that, but I mostly remember the feeling of accomplishment and the colors and the sounds of that game, rather than
smelling that tea is the only way to solve puzzles now in The Witness for you.
But I feel like that is the point, is that it erased the negative memory entirely and then replaced it with a positive one, where if I didn't have this game, or maybe some other outlet, maybe some other kind of video game, where I feel like Animal Crossing for me right now has probably helped me a lot with the self-isolation period of time, I would probably just remember having pneumonia in that particular time as one of the most miserable experiences of my life. But now I don't. I feel like I remember it as the time a good friend and I finished The Witness and how awesome that was. And no, I celebrate it for sure. I like tell people to play the game. I'd be happy to watch them play the game, especially because, again, it's so fucking hard that I've forgotten all the puzzles. Who knows how to solve them? You could show me one and I'd be like, I don't know, these goddamn snake bullshit. I have no idea. Goddamn you, John Blow. So
that dude's brain is a computer.
Yeah, there's that. Have you seen the behind the scenes, or the secret ending for The Witness?
No, I didn't know about
that. Is that the one with the piss bottles?
Yeah. Yeah, it's.
I've never seen it. That was a guess.
if you turn around and you pull piss bottles from your
It says John Blow on
I can
it.
actually see some, I think, on the top of the shelf there.
There you go. Well taken.
You know, if it comes out red, you really got to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
Is that a bottle of Coke?
This is because it's weird that we've not talked about Star Wars enough. This is what Coke is sold as in Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland.
Oh.
I just can't wait until we get the inevitable Daisy Ridley versus Thanos. You know, that's when Disney will just be full Disney. You know,
Yeah.
the collision of IPs
They'll
is
put them
just
both in
completely
Fortnite,
unapologetic.
John Wick's in there as well.
Yeah, exactly.
John Wick's in Fortnite.
Yeah.
Daisy Ridley's in there.
No, we can make that happen though. I'm sure.
Daisy
I think they
Ridley's
had
in
Other
Vader.
Star Wars characters in. I think Daisy Ridley is in
They
there.
did.
Yeah.
Didn't they do
At
like
least
a
the character.
trailer reveal in Fortnite? I think
They
they did.
Well, they had the transmission that the Emperor sends in the opening crawl was in Fortnite and not in the movie,
Fucking
which is
nuts, man.
I mean, as a marketing gimmick, I think that's freaking cool.
I'm totally
yeah,
in
totally.
support.
It was a little cheesy, and I have, you know, we've certainly talked plenty about the Star Wars movies, but but yeah, I remember thinking like, I love the kind of unconventional sort of because Star Wars is so sacred to so many folks, the kind of cooling down of that a little bit to be like, how about we just put a major plot point, well, a semi purported to be major but actually inconsequential plot point in a video game that's utterly unrelated to Star Wars. Like, the thinking that leads you there, I find cool, even if
I think
there's very little else about it. I find cool.
Fortnite is effectively a meme. I feel like it's a game that doesn't get a lot of respect, and I personally do not enjoy playing it, but I think it is just the way it approaches events like that, marketing in general, and the evolution of the game is incredible.
I think event gaming is the future.
Yeah.
I think it's something that everyone should stand up and take notice and go, this is the way that we could do this from now on, is on this date, this thing will happen, and everybody just comes in droves, and they experience this thing, and then it's
That's
to me, that's
Animal
exactly
Crossing
what we-
right now, except that it's not typically a multiplayer game, is everyone is playing part in the
Yeah.
Easter event, which is, you know, I've had MMOs, we've spoken about this before, that I played on and off forever, and I will always go for winter events because I just love a white Christmas, even though I've never had one. I think it's like I get to experience one, even though I've never seen one before.
Yeah.
My favorite go-to for that, the notion of a gaming event, because it's so committed to that, is, do you remember, I think, Troy, you and I have talked about this at length, but in fact, I think this was a project of Rami's, do you remember Glitch Hiker?
Oh my God.
Do you guys know about that?
I talk about this all the time. Tell them it's brilliant.
It was I might be getting some of the details a little bit wrong because it's been a number of years, but I saw it presented about at GDC in the experimental gameplay workshop, where it's a game that the game itself, in a static way, not just like in an absolute way, not localized to your system, but in the world, the game has a finite number of lives.
Yeah.
So every time you die,
Yes.
the game takes a hit, not your
way.
chance of replaying. The result of which is that basically, if enough players fuck it up, it sort of self-destructs and the code is erased and the game disappears forever.
Wow.
And so it very quickly developed, you know, because the thing only lasted like 6 hours or something before, because all it takes is one troll to completely ruin the game. And so as a result, all these people started working overtime, where they're like pulling, like, is this, you know, they sat down to play for an hour and they played for 5 hours trying to keep it alive.
It lasted
and
more
trying
than
to
So
sort
it
of
had a
hours,
invest
mechanic
in it.
where if you played well, you would maintain it?
I think if I remember
you could
correctly,
add lives to the
you
game
could-
by going out and doing certain things. You could find gold or whatever it was that
Got
would
it.
keep the game alive. But it was longer than 6 hours, man. It was something like
It might have been a couple of days. I should look it up and know definitively, but I just remember thinking the notion that the game is finite, and then literally they said in the presentation, you know, it's gone now, it's dead, and we wrote it to take the code with it. Like, we would have to make it from scratch if we wanted to redo it. And I remember thinking,
It's like
as
the
an
opposite
event,
of,
and
of Peter Molyneux, what was it, the Cube game?
Oh, the Curiosity.
Yeah, Curiosity
right?
Cube, I think it was. Yeah, the opposite of that, where everyone was like trying to get to the end of this game, and I played it pretty often. But all you did was tap cubes. You're trying to get to the end of it, and someone got a prize, and the prize was not good.
Did you ever read like the follow-up like articles?
It
about
didn't end up
the
working,
kid who
right?
won? It was like, there was lots of controversy around it. I
Yeah.
think. But, yeah.
around
There's a
Peter
few
Molyneux,
like that.
really?
There's there's a few, I feel bad kind of mentioning them, but there's a few games like that exist, like where there's only one copy of the game and it gets passed to you, and then you're the only person who gets to play it for that. There's a few of these that kind of are these kind of, half of them are like urban legends. Like I love that stuff. Yeah. That stuff's really cool.
I go back and forth because a few years ago, Wu-Tang Clan did an album where they made a single like gold vinyl or whatever, and the only way to hear it was to sign an NDA, surrender your phone, and go to like a controlled listening party. And they basically toured the vinyl around. And I remember when I first read that, I was like, that's the most sort of arrogant, and I think they even said, or you can buy it for $1 million or something like that. And I think someone did.
Didn't that
in fact,
awful medicine guy buy it?
I was going to say, Martin Shkreli or whatever. I think he was actually the one who bought
it. There's a Watch Dogs 2 mission about that.
And yeah, you're right. That's so funny. But yeah, I remember part of me, my initial reaction to that story was like, that's so stupid. Partly because for me, my whole MO is about sharing and is about finding ways to connect with people as widely and broadly as possible. So, but at the same time, the notion of kind of the ephemeral and, it's like when you go to a great meal, you don't think, how do I preserve this forever? You know, I must enjoy this moment because it in an hour or 2 or 3, it's gone. And so, I do have that kind of romanticized view of the things that must be cherished in the moment. And so I kind of go back and forth now on the whole Wu-Tang album thing, because there's part of me that wants to do an album like that as well. That's like, it can only, it will come and go briefly.
I'd do a game, but you'd have to give me $1 million and I'd have to feel that you were morally okay.
One of my best friends, Ethan, who I think you know, Troy.
There's no such thing.
Ethan?
Yeah.
Current Gameplays. He has a YouTube channel with Markiplier where they're uploading a video every single day. And then as soon as, I think it's sometime in November, for a full year, as soon as that year is done, they're just getting rid of all of it. Really just as an experiment. They kind of just wanted to see what would happen. Of course, other people could download the videos. They do, I think, have preventative measures, but in part we're like, we kind of just want to see what people do with this and what it does to the community. And the last I spoke to them about it, they were saying people are coming earlier and really heavily trying to share this thing with one another in the comments, like much more than you would see on an average video. They're really trying to sort of shape an experience for everyone who is partaking and watching these videos every day, which is, I guess, part of being limited. It's been a really positive sort of social experiment for them. Yeah.
Because we don't like when things go extinct. We don't like to, what is that? Is it the finality if Emerson says that all of history exists for the sake of a single person, then is it if that can go extinct, that I'm extinct? Is it what do you think that is?
It might be pretentious, but my assumption would be because it's tied to like the greatest fear anyone has, right? Which is death, which is that it is finite.
We don't like things to end. Yeah.
Yeah, you hope for like most human hopes are tied to longevity, right? They're having having love that lasts forever, having a dynasty,
eternity, heaven, that kind of thing.
Yeah, being famous, it's all about living longer, right? Like it's all tied to that.
Yeah, my guess is a lot more cynical, which is that people like feeling like they're part of an exclusive club.
Yeah,
really
interesting look. A lot more negative way to look at that, but I feel like that's just such a big part of the gaming community.
Unfortunately, like a lot of negative takes, I worry it might be the right one.
Yeah, just people, if you get a sense of, I don't know, superiority for experiencing something that other people won't be able to.
It's probably both. It's probably most people have both in them in kind of evolving ratios of which one is sort of the dominant. But I definitely feel what you're talking about, Troy, of the there's something very powerful about knowing something is fragile. And that it's sort of, I remember I once went to the San Diego Zoo. I don't really like going to zoos. They're always very depressing, but for whatever reason, a few years ago, I went to it wasn't the San Diego Zoo. It was their kind of sister organization. That's kind of more, sort of more like Jurassic Park. It's like, it's not really like
wildlife safari kind of thing.
It's called like is that what it is? Wild Safari? It has a name like that. It's like the safari park or whatever, where it's just huge open sort of tracts of land. It's less about like, here's the exhibit of this animal and that animal. And they're one of their big appeals is that you can zip line over this giant thing with all these roaming animals below you. Where you can't like get in a, you don't walk through their, the carefully manicured path through their stuff.
So sorry, can we just linger on this? So you can zip line over a lion? Is that what?
I think it's more like over giraffes or something, but
Well, that's even
I don't
worse because they're taller, right? So they're going to hit you.
Come on.
You're quite significantly off the ground, but
Okay.
but the thing was, so up until a couple of years ago, when she finally died, they had literally the last or the second to last ever white rhino there, and they said that, and I remember, so we walked past this sort of pond where it was just sitting there, kind of sleeping in the sun and hanging out, and they said this is a species that is functionally extinct, even though there are two of them. One is here, and the other one is somewhere. And
I like
she's
the
pretty
idea that the
old.
zookeeper is like, one's here, the other one. Fuck if I know.
I can't remember.
Out
Yeah.
there.
She just wanders
Also,
off.
if you want to like seesaw on the rhino, it's all about extreme sports combined with the animals. So you can do like
Yeah.
Super
Now's your last
motocross.
chance to taste extinct species. No, it was actually, the thing was, it was a profoundly emotional experience to like, and it's one of those that I consider myself. I don't like to think of myself as apathetic at all to conservationism or environmentalism as causes. There's just other causes I tend to prioritize in my use of time and money and resources and things like that. And which made it all the more surprising to me that just sitting and staring at this animal and just imagining, kind of anthropomorphizing the perspective and thinking, I wonder what it would be like to sit there knowing you're the last ever of your kind,
Something
of your
very sweet
people.
about that rhino not knowing. I'd have no idea.
yeah, that
Maybe
rhino.
so. It just was so poignant to me to think like I am actually looking at the legitimate end of a legacy. Like there is a multi-billion year evolutionary legacy that culminates on one branch in this actual animal, never mind this species.
Yeah.
This actual example of that species represents the end of a really long line. There was something really, really affecting about that.
I used
That
to
was
go
like-
to the Great Barrier Reef all the time as a kid because my mum worked in hotels. Basically, I was born in Cairns, which is the main takeoff point for where the Great Barrier Reef is. I went all the time, probably once a month. We'd go diving, swim in the Great Barrier Reef. Most beautiful thing I've ever seen other than the Northern Lights. Just absolutely incredible. So glad to have seen it. And then I moved from Cairns, I think when I was maybe 12 or so. And I've thought about that before, that now it looks completely different, even in that amount of time. It's been however many years, and it's completely dead. And I didn't know what I was looking at. I wonder, I loved that period of time, and I always thought it was incredible and beautiful, and I have all these very vivid memories of swimming, looking at the Great Barrier Reef, and there are certain kinds of fish that would try to attack your flippers for some reason, and certain fish that would just stare at you, and like the way that they would school to get, it's just this beautiful thing. But I had no idea that it was dying when I was doing that. Would I have felt more positively about it if I knew what was happening to it at the time? Or am I better off for having this untarnished, pure childhood memory of this thing without knowing? Because I don't think I in any way contributed to the downfall of the Great Barrier Reef. So it's not like I made it any worse, but I don't think that I quite knew that what I was looking at, or had the comprehension to know that what I was looking at was not permanent, even though it wasn't. I don't know. I genuinely have no idea. I feel like I'm benefiting
Were you
by
old
not
enough?
knowing.
If someone had specifically told you straight up, this is fragile, this won't there's nothing guaranteeing that this will survive forever. I mean, even at that age, would you have even kind of
Yes,
been able to?
and I had been told, but the Australian rhetoric at the time was, "We will fix it." So my head was always, "They're going to fix it. It's going
Thank
to
God
stop."
society has learned since then not to
can't
make
fix it.
that presumption about
Yeah.
problems as they're coming down the river.
Yeah,
Right?
they were like,
we
we'll
moved.
figure it out. We'll get it back to life. But when coral's dead, you can't bring coral back to life. They figured they'd be able to breed coral and maybe plant more coral. It just doesn't work.
Well, surely it works. You just need a couple of 100,000 years to
Yeah.
run that experiment.
I I feel that because I've experienced both. I've experienced things where you go and you're like, you have to see this because this won't be here, and this is a fleeting thing, and so you're like, oh, okay, and so you're just constantly hyper viewing everything through this lens of this could be gone, and that's one experience. And then others where you had no idea that you would never. It's the same thing of the people that we've known. It's like most people say I didn't know that was the last time I was going to see them. And the purity and the naivete that you got to we just had a cup of coffee, or you have this kind of, I can't help but think for me that the moments that I've had when someone has told me this is the experience that you must have, I'm immediately taken out of being in the moment, because I'm already in that moment where that thing will no longer exist or not be there or whatever. And so I don't really, like, I've been to Venice, and I'm like, it's Venice. It's beautiful, but I was told I needed to go there because it's not going to be there anymore. And so that
you're ticking a box.
Right, that I'm ticking a box, exactly, and I'm framing it by the reason why I'm here is to see this, not because I felt this draw to go to St. Mark's Square. Now, all of the moments that I had there are indelible for a completely different reason other than the scarcity or the short-livedness of that city, even though it's been there for centuries. But the fact that it was never supposed to be there, it was a refugee camp for Christians fleeing persecution. They all showed up in the swamp and started building. It was never supposed to be there. It was like people calling a life raft a cruise ship. It's like, no, that's not what this was intended to be. But then you go to another equally significant thing where, like, Notre Dame, and the last time I was there, I always make sure that I appreciate seeing it because it's one of my favorite pieces of architecture on the planet. But I had no idea the next time that I would see it would never look the same way because of the fire.
Yeah,
and
I have
as
that
a matter of
exact
fact, the last
same
time I was in,
thing,
the
hotel that I stay at
Paris,
whenever I go to Paris is in sight to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And that means that any time that I'm trying to figure out how to get home, I just figure out where Notre Dame is to then get to my hotel. And I've done that every time, which is not that many, 3 times for work. But every time that I've done that, that is my homing beacon. I have my coffee there every morning before I go out. And I feel like
if you're facing the Notre Dame, is it that little cafe that's just there to the left where the streets kind of converge? I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I'll usually take a coffee with me and then sit in that park that is in front of the Notre Dame. So I would actually be facing the building would be behind me.
Yeah.
But I love it there, and I thought about that when it burned, which, I still have this relationship with that where I'm like, I wish that the billionaires had put money into something else other than an old church, and it drives me nuts. But I feel like if I had known, I would have looked at it or associated it with sadness, because you're then forcing something on it. But I have these memories of this building that I love Gothic architecture anyway. I think that building is just so cool that I just don't think about it that way at all. And the lack of permanence as far as that's concerned doesn't upset me as much. And my memories are completely untainted because I didn't know. In that case, I'd prefer to not know, I think. But in terms of family, every time I leave my family in Australia, my brain is programmed to think, you don't know when you're going to be home next. Treat this like this is the last time you're going to see any of them. And my fucking grandma, who's 96, every time goes, I probably won't see you again, love. I'm like, what the fuck? Stop! Oh my God!
I love it though. I love that.
She doesn't care.
Immediately love your grandmother.
Every time, I don't know if we'll see each other again. Fuck you.
No, that's such a beautiful, shining example of stoicism and lovely. It's like, to live is preferred, but I'm okay with death. I've done this, kid. I've been around.
She's really upset right now because she lost her job at a volunteer clothing center where it's called St. Vinny's in Australia. It's like Red Cross, if you have that in the US.
Yeah.
She's very upset that she's lost her job. We were like, you're 96. You should take the time. You're going to be just fine.
She's clearly just using that as an excuse, and that she's obviously very lazy.
I think it's virtue signaling, and she was only part of it anyway, so that the public would know.
Yeah, exactly.
She
Social
like
justice grandma. Woke politics.
Oh man, we are. I feel like again, Alanah, you led us down this great path and kicked us off with such an incredible story.
Yeah, I don't want to be the only one to have shared a story like that.
I can go. I can
Mike.
go.
I'd love that.
Yeah, I'll go. So the first part, the kind of have you worked on stuff, I suspect probably all of us have had the honor of working on something that's kind of touched someone in that way, and it is awesome. I'm always kind of reticent to point to a story, because it always seems so self-serving to be like, here's a story of how I changed someone's life. But yeah, I think with Thomas Was Alone in particular, like that game definitely connects with people who are, I think it's also, and this was never the intention, but I think it kind of specifically because of the title, Thomas Was Alone, I think it is a game that jumps out at people who are in a dark place.
Yeah.
And I think what's surprising is, and people who've not played it assume that it's kind of a mopey emo game. And it really isn't. It's kind of a silly comedy game.
Then why did you get
friendship.
My Chemical Romance to do the soundtrack?
I should have got My Chemical Romance to the soundtrack. Instead, I got David Halston, who insisted on pop fun. But it's kind of, so I think it's almost like a kind of a Trojan horse of positivity that kind of comes into people's lives, and they think it's going to be one thing, and then it's very different. So I think that's helped people, and yes, those messages, they're nice. They're nice. It really, if anyone watching this, if something's touched you like that, the person who made it definitely wants to hear from you.
I always want to hear that.
That is something they
Yeah.
would love to hear,
Yeah.
and you would brighten their day by telling them that.
It can be more than that, right? It can be more than just brighten their day. Like sometimes creators are constantly contending with like imposter syndrome and crippling self-doubt, and sometimes
And criticism.
that positive feedback can be like the reason to keep creating.
Absolutely.
I've had a day where like I've had like a setback on a piece of work, or something's fallen through or whatever. And then, yes, like you say, you then have the message, the Twitter DM or whatever of like, hey, your thing helped me. And it's amazing. It can give you that whole thing of like, I can do the next thing. And definitely, like, it's inspired some of the stuff we're currently working on, like, you know, that positivity and wanting to kind of do something good in that way. And then in terms of what I like, I kind of go the complete opposite way to you, Alanah, with the stuff I like when I'm in a bad place is always like very guided, very linear, very don't let me make a decision. Because for me, because my job is so much about making decisions, for me, relaxation is often, I mentioned Lego the other day, we were chatting, like, Lego's amazing because it's someone else telling me what to do. I get to role play being creative and being an engineer. The first thing I did when I thought I was probably going to have to stay home a bit more was order a bunch of Lego, because that stuff just keeps me ticking over and kind of lets me just sit back and sit behind the Lego designer who's made that, and kind of go, oh, that's really clever how you set up that thing a little while ago, or oh, you just taught me how to do that joint, so that when I get to 3 more later, I feel clever because you set that up. And kind of even the way instructions are organized with Lego does that. In terms of games, though, like, I mean, I'm playing all the Call of Duty single player campaigns again, because they've just released 2 as the
Modern
remaster,
Warfare
so
2.
I've gone back. I'm playing the first one. I'm going to get to the second one. Like,
one of the best campaigns ever.
Brilliant and lots of fun, and absolutely no player choice, absolutely no creativity, just run forward and stay behind that guy and shoot stuff. And genuinely, like, that just is so nice and relaxing for me right now that kind of I'm reverting to those kind of games. I feel like kind of very linear, very simple stuff. I find comfort in just being, you know, comfort food. I guess it's comfort food, video game comfort
Did you ever
food.
play the Back to the Future games that Telltale did?
I feel like I played like the first 2 or 3 episodes. Yeah.
Man, I think there were only 3 episodes.
Oh, maybe I definitely don't think I finished. I got to like I got to the Brown where Doc Brown was like a dictator. So I'm like halfway or something, I think.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It is that is the 4th movie, and to me, the Telltale games can be very
good.
much like that too. What
Is it that good? I didn't realize
Oh
that.
my god, it's so good. It is.
It's in my
4th
Steam
movie.
library because a number of years ago, Telltale did a buy everything we've released for $50
Holy
special or
shit.
whatever. So I have literally everything
R.I.P.
they made in my Steam library, and I haven't played 3/4 of them.
I feel like
The
the
only
go-to
game you shouldn't
ones
play of theirs
are,
is Jurassic Park.
It'd be Back to the Future, Borderlands, Wolf Among Us, Walking Dead. Definitely don't play Batman. He's such a terrible voice actor for the Batman they got in that. It's awful.
Wrong
It's Troy.
casting.
It's
Terrible
Troy.
casting.
Troy did that. I feel like the only one that I've played that I didn't like was Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones was. I'm sorry, it was awful, and
Yeah.
that was. Did you play the Minecraft?
No, I didn't even try it.
Yikes.
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't get far through
Yeah.
that. no.
Yikes! Minecraft and Game of Thrones were just cash grabby.
Yeah.
Monkey Island wasn't very good.
Yeah, I was gonna say Monkey Island didn't understand
What Monkey Island
what
was.
Monkey Island
Yeah,
is.
I didn't even know they did that. I can't imagine how
Yeah,
those
you
two things would work.
shouldn't.
The
Uh,
Minecraft
It's
one
pretty
probably
old.
wouldn't understand what Minecraft is either. That would be the same kind of thing. Like,
but that
Minecraft
was
is
their
about-
whole thing, where it's like, well, what if we flip it on its ear? And I was like, yeah, you
What if
can
we
do
didn't?
that.
What if we
But honestly, the best one that they got was Back to the Future, and it is so much fun to explore in that world. If when I played it, it felt like someone allowed me to just wander through that lot, that back lot, and the set of that, and interact with characters that were just in the background.
The irony is, of course, that the tour for that is like 20 miles away from where you're sat right now.
Not even that, mate.
Are you really close to
Oh,
Universal?
yeah, dude, I could be in Universal like that. Well, that's there's still the downed airplane that came in from what is that? What set was that from?
That was War of the Worlds, wasn't it?
War of the Worlds. That's what it was.
Yeah.
It's crazy to. I remember
And the house, the Psycho House up
Psycho
on the
House
hill.
is
Now
right
it's
there.
the Good Place set as well, because they have the old. It was an old. I feel like it was an old Mexican town they built for westerns years ago that they painted like pastel colors for the Good Place, and that's on the tour as well. And me and my girlfriend just freaked out.
Yeah, Good Place is on. Good Place is on the lot, and then if you go to the ranch, you get to see the Friends Fountain and all sorts of cool stuff too. But I don't know, Austin, I don't know if you remember this or not, but walking out, because at the time I lived in North Hollywood, and I walked out of my apartment and I looked in the sky and I was like, that's not supposed to be there. And there's just this plume of smoke, and it was the archives that caught fire. And I was
Remember
like,
that.
Holy shit, what's on fire?
They
right
lost
now?
some real shit that day too.
Yeah, they did,
Like
man.
they lost some originals of 35 prints and old master tapes and stuff, and it was crazy.
Again, going back to it nowhere near compares to the Great Barrier Reef, but at the same time, I remember feeling that tremendous sense of loss of going, movies that I'd never seen, shows that I'd never watched were gone. And somewhere there may be some version of that, but like that original print of that director's, the culmination of that cast and crew's work is gone. And it's the same thing as like I've been redoing my studio since the whole quarantine, and I have a real hard time with throwing away stuff. I'm not a hoarder. I'm not a pack rat, but I just, especially when it comes to gear, I'm like, I know that's an old Firewire 2 thing, and I'll never need it again. But what if I do? What if I do need it? And there's been so many things that I found. I was like, aha, this is why I kept this cable. But I have far too many USB leads. I don't need them in my life. But it's the whole thing of like the fear of loss.
I've been on the other side of that when I went to I've been fortunate enough to visit Disney a couple of times and doing the tour of the animation studios, and there is a building that to go into, it's the archive where they keep the original like prints of like Sleeping Beauty and whatever.
Holy shit.
And in order to go into that building, you have to sign a waiver that you give Disney permission to kill you if they have to, because the way if a fire spreads in that archive, the only way
to lock it
I don't
down.
know if it's all under idea. I don't know. The only way they can put out a fire is to cut the oxygen out of the room. So by definition, the way to protect that room, because they can't flood it with water, that wouldn't work, and celluloid's ridiculously flammable, right? So,
right.
So there's like a waiver which is basically like if we let you in this room, and I wasn't in no way important enough to go and be in that room, but if you want to be in this room, you have to basically sign a waiver saying they can cut the oxygen from that room and they're not liable for the lack of oxygen being a problem for you. And
how much is your life worth? Clearly not enough. Holy
I initially
shit.
thought that's
I think I'd
awful.
still do it.
Genuinely,
for sure.
exactly. That was my thought process. I was like, you know what? That sounds fair. Like if it's a choice between me or the entire Disney library,
Yeah, I'll die.
the world needs them more than me, right? Like that's
Plus,
actually
it's my goal also to have a very noteworthy cause of death.
It's one hell of a way to die, isn't it?
Yeah, like that needs to be in the headline. Like it shouldn't be like, as much as I appreciate the sentiment, and I genuinely
Man
do,
dies for
of,
Sleeping
like,
Beauty.
Yeah, surrounded by loved ones and whatnot. It's like what they all got pulled into the archive, lack of oxygen. Also, like to me, I want there to be a story right in amidst that.
My number
and
one
that's a
life
good
goal
one.
is to go to space. That's it. That's the goal. That's the number one thing I
man.
want in life is go to space.
Speaking of John Hurt, man, if I were to ever get terminally ill like that, what he did in Contact, hell yeah, man. To
I
die
haven't seen
among
it.
this.
What does he do?
Ugh.
You haven't seen Contact?
Oh
I
my
have
God.
I have a massive. I'm surprised that we've only just gotten to this lapse in films and TV, because my whole life I've just played video games and have had such.
Okay.
So
I love
last
you
year
so
I watched
much right
so
now.
many, like, I watched my first Tarantino movie last year. I watched The Godfather. I've only just, like, all of these major films just recently. Yeah, it's a very big lapse.
Did
in
you
my
watch one or
vocab.
two or both? Did you just watch the first?
Both.
But no, John Hurt in Contact. He's this brilliant billionaire eccentric that ends up funding the work
machine.
of. Well, yeah, for sure. Why build one when you can build
You can
two?
build two
for
and double the cost.
But he's sick and he's dying throughout the course of the movie. And not to spoil it, but the book came out 40 years ago. So
now.
he ends up going to space, and he's just got this great moment. He's just so stoic about it. He says, apparently the lack of gravity is the only thing that's keeping the cancer from eating my body alive. And as it's just beautiful, the way that he's this side character whose life actually reflects everything that's happening on Earth. Carl Sagan is just one of my
Next level.
Yeah, next level, man. I met his wife, and
He is
I cried
absolutely
when I
one of
met
my
her.
heroes, like
Yeah.
100%, in a way that I've tried to model some of the stuff that I do after him in a way that he was a person who had a wealth of knowledge, and his only MO was to share it with every other person as accessibly as possible, in a way that everything that he knew, he wanted everyone else to be able to know, should they want to, without being preachy, in a way that he's not talking down to anyone. And he's
We need
also
more
not
compassionate geniuses. In
Yeah,
films.
he's
Like
just-
that
he's not,
attitude is a solid one.
He was filled with wonder, and that's the thing that I loved about him. Everything that he did was not. There was no derision. There was no condemnation for anything. Everything had wonder attached to it. And as Austin has not only exemplified, but also helped me frame and drawn me to, it's to love the question, not to seek the answer. To be much more, to chase after the questions and love why, and love the not knowing more than it is proving the answer that I have, or needing to have the answer that I don't.
some Ravenclaw ass shit.
That does sound very Ravenclaw.
That's
like,
so Ravenclaw.
Also get the answer though.
Yes.
Also get the answer.
Yes. No, I am
Yeah.
also a Ravenclaw. I love learning. That's my big MO, is anytime that I get to learn something, I'm gonna love it. And that's to the point of, like, losing permanence. I kept wanting to say that I have this very absurd thing where occasionally I just think about the fact that the Library of Alexandria burned down and get sad. Wasn't in my lifetime. I have no idea what was in there. I have no knowledge of what that even looked like, really.
That's why it's
Just-
a tragedy.
It just fucking bums me out. And, like, the knowledge that could have been in there, that people put in there, because for anyone who doesn't know, basically anyone who passed into the city, any book they had, they would keep, they would replicate the book and give it back to you, but you would only have the replica. They would have the original. It was a rule for actually going there. Like, the
What?
fucking... Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I had this period growing up where I became obsessed with the Library of Alexandria also, that may very well be true, but for sure that was the whole idea. It's like a trade hub that had the whole world's knowledge
I know.
essentially
Yeah.
at that time.
Gives me goosebumps thinking about it, how awesome that is as a thing. Which, I mean, yeah, sure, that kind of exists on the internet now, but I mean, that's an incredible resource. We don't give the internet enough credit for how much you can learn. I used to, when I was drunk, I'd just go on these rabbit holes where I'd, like, learn about a black hole, or learn about an African killer bee, or learn about the inflation crisis in Zimbabwe. I have all of these, like, these are actual things that I looked up that, like, genuinely I'd just be drunk and be like, what do I want to learn about today? And you could just, the fact that you can do that on the internet is amazing. And sometimes
Oh,
I
dude,
do
You
get
can't
sad.
forget all of it, right?
That's no.
That's
See,
all.
that's,
No.
that's the difference between me.
Let me
yeah.
talk to you about that hyperinflation, man. They would have to take giant bags to the bank because the currency was so worthless that to even take the currency out, it's like a suitcase for $2. It's just nuts.
Everyone should read more history. It's just
Yeah.
a really fun thing to like. History's better than any fiction that's ever been written.
Absolutely, it
And
is.
now we have time. I highly recommend checking out.
Yeah, read some
History.
history from 0 AD right through
You might
to
have heard of it.
2020. I can
History.
recommend every moment of it.
I, however, do not have time because I'm gonna have to jump off.
Well then, Troy, what's your answer to Alana's prompt?
Give me a game that saved you.
Yeah, the one that I actually had picked out.
The Last of
To
Us.
this was it. Yeah, so there's so many easy punts. but
Telltale's Batman.
the one that I keep, yeah, Telltale's Batman. The first game that employed me. I have a treasure trove of stories of like Mike said, games that we've been a part of that have meant something to other people. The one that I kept coming back to, and I've thought about your question a lot, Alanah, and I wanted to give it the respect that it deserves, but for some reason, the answer that keeps coming back to me is Crystalis, or Crystalis, however you prefer to say it, which was a 1990 NES game. I went through a period of time where every night all I did was I went online with my friends and we played, and that whole thing fell apart. And so I had packed up every console that I had, and I took it out of my room, and I wanted nothing to do with it, because just like you talked about, the possibility of the surrounding contextual experience that you have, whether you pneumonia or whatever, could potentially taint gaming and playing for you. That did it for me. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I got rid of everything, and then we started doing the show, and I just got really hip to playing. I got my first Retro Pi that allowed me to go back and play these old NES games. And I remember that there was a game that I started for my, I guess it would have been my 10th or 11th birthday, and I was allowed to, across the highway from where we lived, 2-lane highway, doesn't matter, was a video store, and they did, not only did they have movies, but they also, you could rent an NES and one game for 24 hours for like $10. And that was about all the money that my parents had to spend for me for my birthday. And so that's what I did. And I had 24 hours to beat this game. And you could order the books, but at that time,
Hand guides.
Yeah, the guides, but there was no, this is before, this is NES, so there's no saves, if you turn the machine off, you're done. And you also know, nobody knew it was like, oh, Legend of Zelda is when you're going to play. There was no review, there was no Metacritic. You just went, you're like, I don't know, the key art on this box looks cool, I'm going to buy that one. And,
or if it's just the one that wasn't rented.
Right,
like that was always
exactly.
my story. You ended up choosing things because no one else had.
So Crystalis was C. It was up here, and I was like, I don't know, grab this one and play it. It looks pretty cool. And I got so far in the game. And then for the last 30 years, that game has sat unfinished for me. And I looked through the library of all the games that it had, and that was on there. And I was like, what if I can beat it? And I did. And I spent the next, I think a week playing through that. And it's obviously a single player game. And that reminded me that what gaming had become for me, it didn't have to be that. It could just be my experiences in that. And if I could feel good about that, then potentially I could feel good about other things. So I remember I have a screenshot of it, the night that I finally finished that game, and the final frame of that game. I walked out with my phone and I took a picture, and I cried, because I was like, the 11-year-old kid in me was standing next to me in that moment. And I just want to look at him and go, it's going to be okay. Because there's some of the best moments and worst moments that I've had have been with games. And that game is what kind of said, why don't you pick up the next game? And why don't you pick up the next game? So oddly enough, it's a game from 1990 that actually carried me through a hard time, and has been one of my most impactful games.
Was there a wistfulness to finishing it? Like finally closing that door?
Yeah, dude.
Like
I walked out of my room, and I think Pam was in the living room or something. I just kind of walked out slowly, and I said, I did it. And she knew exactly what it was, because that's all. I would walk out of my room at times and be like, okay, so I have the Sword of the Wind, but I don't have, I have the fire bracelet, and I just need you to understand what this means right now, because the world that I'm in, it was one of those beautiful moments, probably like you had with Witness.
I've intentionally never finished Banjo-Tooie, which is one of my favorite games ever, because that game makes me think of my childhood so much. And I play that game every year on my birthday. I will play Banjo-Tooie. And I have this weird feeling that I know is irrational, where I feel like if I finished that game, that I would be closing my childhood. That's the way I've always felt about it. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from or when I decided that. But at some point, I was like, I will never finish that game. Because every year on my birthday, I go back and I play that game, and I remember being a kid and playing my N64. And very similarly, I loved so many experiences where I would rent an N64 game and be in someone else's world. like with Majora's Mask or Jet Force Gemini was one for me. I'd rent them before I could buy them. My parents didn't have any money when I was a kid, so a lot of it was rentals and then buying something secondhand way later. So you get someone else's save file and you see the worlds they experience, and I could never bring myself to delete anyone else's world. It's like I loved that I was getting to explore what they had done, not knowing who they were, because those save files existed on cartridges.
That
should be
feels
a
like that
feature.
should be a game.
Yeah.
That should be a thing.
Mike,
That's a
That's a really nice. But genuinely, like, imagine if there was like an open world a PlayStation Prestige open world game. Like, you know, Horizon or you know, whatever. I was going to list every open world game that wasn't one that Troy was in, just to be mean, but my brain is actually slowed
You
down.
went Horizon and then you ran out of games Troy.
I ran out of games. There are no other games Troy is not in.
We were talking about the fucking Crew last week. I was like, I have to go play the Crew. You guys, that's what I'm doing. And then I play the Crew and I'm like, is that Troy? What the fuck?
It's always Troy.
And I didn't know because I told you
It's
guys, I was like, I gotta go
warm
play
blanket.
it.
It's
It's like,
lovely.
that's fucking Troy again.
But anyway, but I guess my point is, like, yeah, I think what Austin said is true. Like, it would be really cool in a game if you could play one of those and you could, like, grab your friend's save and just kind of, walk around the town that character has existed in and hear stories about the things they've done. That's kind of a badass idea. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I did it with Ocarina of Time.
If anyone's watching this and has $200 million,
so
I always found it really
David's
sweet.
wanna ship that out.
Yeah.
we'll get that
Okay,
done.
fine, 150, but you know, obviously we'll have to scope the game.
it's related to how I can't remember. I have this weird feeling I brought this up maybe last week or the week before. So forgive me if this is redundant, but I remember Bob Evans watched this 90-minute cut of The Godfather, I remember when I was a student, I went to the student bookstore and they had, or the student library, I mean, at USC, and they had a shelf that was like, these are all, you know, retired books, basically. Just take it if you want it, free of charge. And there was it's basically the story of Mike's backdrop.
So this is the same bookshelf. This is the one.
I can't wait for you to pull up the copy of the book I'm about to mention.
Wouldn't it be amazing if I could? Go for it.
You have no idea the heart attack that would cause, because it'd be just unreal. But they had an old music theory textbook from like the 50s that was this proposition of like a different way of thinking about music theory, and that's where you're supposed to, Mike, say like, which edition would you like?
I was going to say,
yeah.
I realised the only book I have about music is one on the history of musical theatre, and I'm guessing it wasn't that one.
It wasn't that. No, this was like a pedagogical text about music theory, except it was
Writing that word down.
It was it didn't take it, because we have like this system of music theory that's been refined and developed over hundreds of years, and then this composer in the 20th century, around maybe the 40s or 50s, Paul Hindemith, said, I have a different idea, and no one really adopted his idea. So this book, or this series of books, kind of came and went. He's very well respected as one of the great kind of classical composers of the 20th century, but I never even knew about this, and it was sitting there for free, and it was like an old copy, beat to hell. And so I remember I picked it up and I just was curious, started reading it, you know, as a music nerd. And what I loved about it, and it changed my book buying habit forever, was that some student, or probably multiple generations of students, had to use this book as their textbook. So it was full of highlighting and underlining. And the best part was, because this represented a rejected methodology, there was a lot of like sarcastic comments written in the margins from people that he would say things like, you know, there would be a comment saying, you know, this now arms you with a proper tool for analyzing harmony or something.
No, it just
and then
says,
and
"Okay,
in the
Boomer."
margin they'd be like, I bet it does. Sure, you know, you're damn right, Paulie, or whatever. Like, you could
Composers
see.
are terrible people.
I know, the worst.
Arrogant.
Frustrated musicians in writing in the margins, and I felt like I was having a conversation with a stranger who I will never know anything about,
I
and
love
it was
that.
so exciting, and it added this third dimension to the reading experience of like, it's no longer just me and the author. There's this other audience member that from then on, I only was buying books on Amazon that were like the 1 penny version, because they're so damaged.
That's what I do.
That
I buy
they're,
secondhand
theoretically
books.
are valued.
Won't do a Kindle. I love a secondhand book,
Yep.
and then I will sell them again as soon as I'm finished with them.
There is,
Yeah, it's amazing.
to
It's amazing.
To pass that on, I struggle. I can't do that because I want to hold on to them. But Abe Books, ABE, Alpha Bravo Echo Books, is really, really good resource for stuff like that. I've bought several from them, and they are basically an aggregator for. I believe in going to local bookshops. There's a great bookshop in London, Mike, called Mag's Books that's been there for Shepherd's Bush, I think, is where they are. They've been there for 150 years, whatever. And I've held a first generation Moby Dick. I've held a first generation Arms in the Covenant, which was really cool. Which the story attached to that is brilliant. But I love that. Matter of fact, to piggyback on that story, the copy of the Arms of the Covenant that I held, I asked him specifically, I was like, what is your favorite, what book are you most proud of that you have? And he handed it to me, and he was like, what is this book? I don't even know what this book is. And he shared it with me that this was the book that Churchill wrote as a treatise to inform his friend at the time, who was on the opposite side of political spectrum, that the Nazis were going to invade, and it was up to Britain to stand in the way. Otherwise, this would just spill over into the rest of the world. And so he wrote this treatise, Arms in the Covenant. And his friend, who was the prime minister, took the book and he tossed it over his shoulder and threw it out the window, and it landed in the garden. And his valet is the one who went and retrieved it and picked it up. And he goes, and that's the copy that you're holding there.
No way.
And there was a water stain from it, and it was personally inscribed by Churchill. And I was like, holy crap, man. So it's stories like that, like you say, you open up and to see someone's, name, and 1947 or whatever it was when they first read this book. I've done that to my copy of Marcus Meditations.
I should start doing that. I don't touch the books that I get, but maybe even if I just put my name in it, like, then I'm at least contributing, because I like having.
I'm trying to think of my best example of this, and I think the one that I have is I own my dad's childhood chess set. And in Biro, it's got all of where he drew dicks on it as a teenager.
That's great, man.
And it's the coolest thing. Like, to have something that belonged to my dad when he was a dumb kid.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, awesome. I feel like
not as glamorous as what you're describing.
No, that's still really cool, though.
That. Yeah.
I feel like Journey as a game, I mean, does that a little bit. That's part of the
you can draw dicks in it, yeah.
You can draw dicks in Journey, and there's Biro over it. No, the fact that you find out that you're playing with someone who's assisting you, or you're playing with someone else and not just an AI, is a similar kind of concept, I think.
It's funny because I never thought that would be a thing. It was never our goal on that to trick people into thinking this is a co-op. It's like a secret co-op experience. I mean, at least I don't recall that being a conversation. I remember they intentionally wanted to take away every possible means by which players might troll each other, just to try to purify it to this very positive experience where it's basically impossible to not be, and it's very easy to walk away if you're not feeling it. And so there was so much conversation on that never even dawned on me that people would just assume it's some kind of really clever AI.
Oh yeah.
And then be shocked at the end to see the PSN handles. Which, by the way, that is where then the dick jokes appear. We had that once at a Journey live show where we finished the show and the game ends with this song and you see the credits and it's usually pretty somber and we get these quiet rooms and sometimes you can really hear a pin drop in there and you have a few hundred people, or some cases far more than that, in this and they tend to be very wrapped with attention. And then when it's like companions met along the way, Dick Jockey 69. It's like,
Chicken fucker
we
99.
had that one particular one where that happened, and the audience just exploded in laughter. It ended up being the perfect, because we are playing live, networked, and it's a random stranger or multiple, and so you get the real experience as a concert, but it was hilarious. It was one of those where it was like, okay, well, I don't think it ruined
the appeal of it. I feel like that just adds to a community experience.
It capped the experience nicely.
Yeah, I'm massively distracted because PlayStation just released the images of the new controller.
Did they?
What?
How'd that look like?
I'll tell you what it doesn't look like, the one that I'd seen before now, so that's cool.
I think the pivot to the PS5 controllers is an excellent sign that we should make our way to.
Because we all got bored from what we were talking about, obviously. No, we should.
No, I wanted to throw mine into this mix because it's an anomalous one. I guess kind of like The Witness in a way that it is a. It is not a game. It's just what dawned on me when you first brought up the question, and I couldn't stop thinking about it because I kept thinking, really, that one? Because I haven't had a lot of conversations about it since I played it, but it was Davey Wreden's game, The Beginner's Guide, which was, for me, when I'm at my worst, like if I'm in a shitty place, that's usually very much tied to the notion of creativity itself, and especially, all our talking just a minute ago about longevity and all that kind of crap. I think it's like if I feel suddenly hampered in my ability to do the one thing that I feel wired to do, that's at my most vulnerable. And it's like going deaf would be kind of my absolute worst nightmare. You could take away everything. I could be a brain in a vat, Futurama style, but if I can hear, I'm connected to the thing that is sort of above all else for me. And so I've had some really, like, few years ago, about 5-6 years ago, I had starting this sort of 24-month period of just absolute overwhelming darkness, of just everything that could go wrong, from people in my life dying to having massive professional setbacks, marriage falling apart. It was like it was just constantly.
You were a country song.
I know it was. It's true. I almost moved to Nashville and started over. No, but actually, ironically, that's the thing. It was like I could feel the creative well drying. I felt, and that was to me the sign that everything truly was breaking at the foundational level. Because it was always, music is the escapism, right? Music is the thing that when all else fails, I have this truly reliable safe harbor. And when I found myself in the midst of all this shit, and then turning to my piano, or turning to a piece of paper or a sketch pad, or turning to my software, and it just seemed like pulling teeth. Music was coming out harder and harder and harder. That's when I realized, like, okay, it's not just that I'm in a kind of rough period, but something's actually broken. Something's actually going on really wrong here. And this I don't know how to fix.
Would love to address the fact that the what do they call it? The struggling artist is bullshit, and we should stop romanticizing that. Because people would tell you, well, you'll make the best art when you're sad. It's all horseshit.
Well, I think it depends. It depends on the flavor of your struggle, right? Because struggles can really be amazing teachers.
Yeah. And also inspiration, but I think the idea that you have to be sad or struggling is just absurd.
That I completely agree
with. I think it's to do with your outer situation. If you're under, like, our best games have definitely the ones we've created under the most constrained circumstances, but we were happy while we did it. We were just enjoying being under weird circumstances.
No question. But you do kind of hit it, Alanah, with that, because I was like, the thing that made that game so powerfully healing for me was that it's like a gamified walkthrough of just examining creativity, basically, and examining the interface of creativity with sort of personal health and happiness. And it's a very introspective game. And the reason why it was so powerful is it was like I kept stopping the game and turning to my computer and writing myself an email, be like, oh, I just got an idea for this. I need to remember later to go do this. And it was like the game took me 3 times longer than normal than, like, if I just went straight through it, because I was this explosion of inspiration, of ideas unrelated to the game. It's like it got my subconscious working again. It put gas in the tank in a way that I will be so forever grateful to it. And I cherish it and I love it, but it was like, it was an essential sort of treatment that I didn't know I needed, because I just play, it was like, oh, I like Davies, a nice guy. We're friendly with each other. And Stanley Parable was a game that I thought was cool and I thought, presented interesting ideas. So I just kind of got it on autopilot, the way I often do when someone noteworthy releases a game. And I just dove in completely blind. And it was like, it's not like it was this cure-all, and I don't mean to mischaracterize it as, because that would imply my problems were actually quite shallow, but it reminded me what it felt like to kind of have that fire of inspiration and help reorient me onto a path to actually get in that place again.
I love that. That's awesome.
I've never played it.
It was one of those, I'm indebted forever to that. It was so, and I also advocate it all the time to people, and
That sounds
it did reasonably
very
well,
similar
but
to my
not a
relationship with
monster
The
hit.
Witness. Is that like I feel like I'm in debt to it, and I recommend it all the time. I'm like this game did something for me, even if in theory I did it myself. It was just that I needed something that was very, I guess, intellectually stimulating or challenging or rewarding. That game is so good at doing that I feel like I will carry that with me forever. That it's like that's the game that got me through pneumonia.
I'm really grateful that I have the two people that are on this call that have helped create games. That you guys have truly made games that I constantly, and I'm sure Alana's the same way, tell people, even if they've never played a game before, this is the game that you should play. Mike, I've even told you this story, is like being from the train from London to Paris playing Thomas Was Alone. And by the time I got off the train, we got into the hotel and I couldn't shut up about it. I was like, Pam, you just need to play this game. And she sat down. Thomas Was Alone.
Oh, that's nice.
I played on the iPad. I was like, you have to play this game. And she was like, well, he's just so sad. I was like, she instantly like anthropomorphized everything.
That's what's amazing. That's the biggest trick in Thomas Was Alone, is that, like, obviously I'm proud of it and I'm proud of the work we did, but at the same time, like, it's a game that so much relies on the empathy you bring to it. And it was the biggest. I remember the first prototype I made had no storytelling, no music, just rectangles, and all the comments were, talking about like the yellow one at that point, what didn't even have a name, the one that ended up being Chris. People saying, he must be so annoyed that he's so much littler than the other ones.
He abused the empathy.
That's what's so cool about Thomas, is there's so much empathy you bring. My job on that, in terms of the writing and in terms of what we did with the music and the art, was just to stay out of your imagination.
To let people bring what they can to it, yeah. Because you can force people out of something by forcing empathy too much, I think.
100%,
same thing with Journey.
Yeah, I have no interest in making a player cry. Like that, to me, that's not my job. Like, that's so much to do with what they bring to it. So
I think
you open a door and you invite them, if they want to walk through it, they can.
Yeah. Just be like, have a response. I invite you to have a response, and you may laugh, you may cry, but it's the same thing that Neil Druckmann says.
I definitely want them to laugh at my jokes. I definitely want them to laugh at my jokes. That matters.
I just wanted it to be said that I'm grateful, as we like you said, Austin, you constantly advocate, and Alanah, how you you said you're the champion for this game. It's like I think it's pretty cool that we have two people on here that I'm looking at my screen, and half of this side are consumers and the other half of the side are creators, and we're all creators in our own right, but by and large, I've never made a game. I've been a part of making a game, but you guys have just created games that we're constantly telling people, you have to play this, you have to play this. So I just think that's really cool.
That's very kind.
Well, for what it's worth, I feel like, to the extent that I've made games, is the same extent as you, Troy, because Mike is the true game maker here.
Yeah, I just felt weird about
with a
leaving
magic
everybody
shelf.
else out.
I just have books. I just pull out a book on how to do it. I just make what's in the book. I think ultimately, if there's one thing I hope anyone who's been listening to this podcast, and it's lovely actually seeing how much people enjoy this podcast and hearing like from the people who make games. If there's one lesson I hope is intrinsic to the very format of this podcast, is there are no auteurs. There's no one person who's responsible for anything you love. We're all ultimately individuals coming together to make things. And yeah, it's very nice of you guys to say that, but ultimately, like, Thomas Was Alone is the result of many people's work. Every game I've made since is the result of way more people's work. We're all collaborators. And I think
Hideo Kojima game.
Now, how you market stuff is different. As one of the owners of Biffle Games,
you're right.
I definitely am not above that, but that's a marketing thing, right? You use a name. I'm a useful proxy when we're talking about the games and we're trying to sell stuff, but that's a different thing to the creation of a game. And the creation of a game is collaborative.
I would add that even in a Toby Fox scenario where Undertale, I'm pretty sure, was literally just him.
It was.
I think there was not a single other person involved. Music, art, animation, programming, design, everything, even publishing. It was Toby Fox. Toby Fox.
How'd he do that?
It's crazy. It's astonishing. But I would add, even that this again, I risk sounding very pretentious, but I think the collaboration that is there is with the players, because if he had made a game and then never released it, then he is, in the most pure sense, an auteur, because your game is nothing without people bringing their life into it.
Well said.
And yes, it might be one relationship, but to me, it's like you know, in music or live, like Troy talking about stand-up last time, like you feel that reaction very viscerally in the room in the moment, but it doesn't go away just because you downloaded it through Steam or whatever and played it at home. There's still a dynamic happening between creator and performer that is that last stage of the collaboration.
As soon as a game releases, a lot of studios that I've interviewed have said this, the game is no longer theirs. It is everyone's. And I think that's something that I really love about video games is that, yeah, we all do bring our own... Because games are interactive, they let you be more empathetic than films generally do. Because you're in the shoes of what's happening. And I think the minute that the game is released and the world has it, they get to put whatever is happening in their life into it. The Witness, for me, is a very specific thing that Jonathan Blow never would have known would happen or would have occurred to him. But that's what that game is for me. That's what I made it because I was playing through it at that period
and
of
to
time.
an extent, it doesn't matter what he was going for. Yeah. Ultimately, the version of The Witness exists for you is the version that exists for you. It doesn't... If Jonathan Blow showed up tomorrow and said, "No, Alanah, you've completely misunderstood my art,"
doesn't matter.
Which Jonathan Blow probably would be comfortable doing. He's got strong opinions on lots of things.
That's true.
But like that wouldn't affect your experience, right?
No.
Because it doesn't belong to him anymore.
Games are a unique medium, and it's like I said, one of the things that makes me exceptionally passionate about them is that the minute that they release, everyone brings a piece of them to that thing. No matter who they are, they could not be creative in the slightest, and you will still bring just a history of who you are as a person to every RPG that you play and to every choice that you make, and then to how you talk about the game to everyone else as well. It's just because they're interactive, become all of ours and not just the person who made it, which I think is awesome. Shout out to video games. All right, I think that should wrap this up.
I don't think we can top that
episode. Sorry to keep you, Troy. I hope you're okay.
All good.
Screw you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, the show is weekly, so we will see you guys next Friday. Thank you.
We'll
everyone.
just see how long we keep going weekly.
Yeah, who
too.
knows?
I'm liking it.
Who knows?
It's fun.
We'll figure it out. All right, see ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye.